Welcome to the lands of science fiction stories. I wish you a pleasant listening experience.
The transport ship Endeavour sliced through the atmosphere of Thorus, a remote and hostile planet deep within the Vargoon expanse. The dark, stormy clouds parted as the vessel descended, its hull glowing red from the atmospheric friction. Inside, Sergeant Ethan Valen stood at the helm, his rugged face expressionless, eyes locked on the flickering monitors. His squad, the Vanguard 7, known for surviving missions no one else would dare, sat strapped into their seats, their weapons checked and secured. Thorus was a death world, known across the galaxy as a place where life barely clung to the planet's surface, and the harshest conditions tested the limits of survival. It was the perfect setting for their mission. "Touchdown in 5, the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Ethan glanced back at his team. Each of them bore the scars of countless campaigns, their bodies honed by battle, but Thorus would push even them to the edge. No one had set foot on this world in decades, not since the last expedition vanished without a trace. "Remember the brief," Ethan said, his voice a low rumble that carried authority. "We're here to retrieve data from the abandoned colony. In and out, no heroics. We get what we came for and head back to orbit. The locals aren't friendly." "Understood, Sarge," grunted Corporal Marcus Jacks, a towering man with a frame that seemed to barely fit inside his combat armor. His eyes were a hard, steely blue, reflecting the cold determination of a soldier who had seen too much. The ship rocked slightly as it landed on the surface, the engines whining before powering down. The ramp dropped with a hiss, revealing the barren, icy wasteland beyond. A fierce wind howled, carrying snow and debris in swirling gusts. The temperature gauge on Ethan's wrist display showed a bone-chilling -60 degrees Celsius. "All right, let's move," Ethan ordered, his voice calm as he led the way into the freezing expanse. The squad stepped out, their boots crunching through the thick layers of frost. Their armor, insulated and equipped with thermal regulators, kept the biting cold at bay, for now. They moved in silence, each step calculated, eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of life or danger. Thorus was a desolate planet, covered in vast glaciers and towering ice formations that stretched toward the sky like jagged spears. The remnants of the colony were barely visible through the storm, a ghostly silhouette in the distance. They advanced toward it, their senses heightened, knowing that this planet had a reputation for being unforgiving to those who ventured too far. "Picking up some heat signatures ahead," said Specialist Lena Core, her voice tense as she checked her scanner. "But it's faint. Could be from machinery still running on emergency power." "Could be, or it could be something worse," Ethan replied, narrowing his eyes. They continued toward the ruins, their rifles raised, scanning the decayed structures for any signs of movement. The colony had been a joint effort between humans and the Kularn, an alien race that had been wiped out in the same incident that led to the colony's abandonment. The silence of the place was unsettling, even for a team like theirs. As they reached the main control hub, the wind picked up, howling like a banshee. Ethan motioned for them to take cover inside one of the buildings, its exterior half buried in ice. The door creaked open, revealing a dark and cold interior. Lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the walls. "Get the systems online, Core," Ethan said, moving further into the room. The rest of the squad took positions, setting up a perimeter in case they weren't alone. Lena quickly moved to the terminal, her fingers flying across the controls as she tried to access the colony's mainframe. The ancient systems groaned in protest, but soon the faint hum of power coursed through the structure. Lights flickered back to life, illuminating the room in a cold, sterile glow. "I've got it," Lena announced. "Downloading the data now. It'll take a few minutes, though." "Make it quick," Ethan said, his eyes scanning the snow-covered horizon outside. Something felt wrong. The planet was too quiet, too still. Just then, a loud screech echoed through the air, followed by a distant rumble. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, sending a shiver through even the most battle-hardened of the team. "What the hell was that?" Private Reed muttered, gripping his rifle tighter. Ethan's hands shot up, signaling silence. His instincts were screaming at him. Something was coming, something big. His helmet's HUD flashed with new readings, indicating movement in the storm. Dozens of heat signatures were emerging from the ground, converging on their position. "Hostiles incoming," Ethan barked, Everyone, defensive positions now. The squad scrambled, their weapons aimed at the entrance. Through the whirling snow, dark figures began to emerge. Hulking, multi-limbed creatures with sleek black carapaces that glistened in the dim light. They moved swiftly, almost invisible against the icy backdrop. "Open fire!" Ethan commanded. The room erupted with the sound of gunfire, bullets tearing through the air as the creatures charged. They moved with terrifying speed, leaping across the frozen ground, their razor-sharp claws slashing through the air. Ethan's pulse rifle barked in his hands, each shot precise, but the creatures kept coming. "These aren't just animals," Jax growled, crushing the skull of one of the creatures with a well-placed blow from his rifle's stock. "They're organized." Ethan knew he was right. These things weren't mindless beasts. They were tactical, coordinated, and relentless. "Core, how much longer?" Ethan shouted over the gunfire. "2 more minutes," Lena yelled, her fingers flying across the console. "Make it 1." The creatures were closing in, their numbers overwhelming. Ethan fired another shot, taking down one of the creatures mid-leap, but more replaced it. The air grew thick with the stench of blood and the cold bite of the planet. Time was running out. "We need to fall back," Jax yelled, his voice strained as he fended off 2 of the creatures with brutal efficiency. "Not yet," Ethan roared. "Hold the line." The data was almost within their grasp, but it felt like the planet itself was rising to stop them. The creatures charged in waves, their alien forms darting through the frozen winds of Thorus, undeterred by the withering hail of bullets from Vanguard 7. Ethan's pulse rifle glowed hot in his hands, the rhythmic thrum of energy discharges filling the cold air. He fired, one shot after another, striking down 2 more of the multi-limbed beasts as they surged forward. "Hold the line!" Ethan barked, his voice cutting through the chaotic din of battle. To his left, Jax fought with brutal efficiency, each swing of his rifle sending another creature sprawling into the snow. He grunted, sweat dripping down his brow despite the freezing temperatures. A beast lunged at him, and he sidestepped, driving the butt of his rifle into its skull with a sickening crack. "They just keep coming," Jax yelled, slamming another round into his rifle's chamber. Ethan's HUD flashed with another set of readings. More of the creatures, dozens of them, advancing through the storm like shadows in the whiteout. He narrowed his eyes, his mind racing. The creatures were outnumbering them, but he had faced worse odds before. They needed to buy more time. "Core!" Ethan shouted, ducking behind a half-ruined wall as another creature leaped toward him. He brought his rifle up and fired, the shot piercing its chest and sending it crashing to the ground. "What's the status on the data?" "Almost done," Lena Core replied, her voice taut with focus as she hunched over the terminal, fingers moving at lightning speed. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cold. "Just another 30 seconds," Ethan cursed under his breath. 30 seconds felt like a lifetime in the middle of this onslaught. The creatures were relentless, clawing through the snow and ice with horrifying precision. They weren't just attacking blindly, they were testing the squad's defenses, pushing them into a corner. "They're cutting us off!" Private Reed yelled, his voice tinged with panic as 2 of the beasts flanked his position. His rifle barked, but one of the creatures was too fast, slamming into him with the force of a freight train. Reed grunted as he hit the ground, his weapon skidding out of his hand. "Reed!" Ethan shouted, turning just in time to see Reed struggling under the weight of the beast. Without thinking, Ethan sprinted toward him, raising his rifle. He fired twice, the first shot grazing the creature's exoskeleton, but the second pierced its neck, sending it tumbling off Reed's body. "Get up!" Ethan barked, grabbing Reed by the collar and hauling him to his feet. Reed's breath came in ragged gasps, his face pale from more than just the cold. "Thanks, Sarge." "Don't thank me yet," Ethan said grimly, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The creatures were regrouping, their dark forms barely visible through the swirling storm. They were adapting, learning from each failed assault, and Ethan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. These weren't mindless beasts, they were something far more dangerous. "We need to move," Ethan shouted, signaling to his squad. "Core, is the data ready?" "Got it," Lena called, yanking a data chip from the console and shoving it into her gear. "We're good to go." Ethan didn't waste a second. Jax, Reed, fall back. Core, stay close to me. We're pulling out now. The squad moved with practiced precision, covering each other as they retreated from the control hub. The creatures were on them in seconds, swarming from all directions, but Vanguard 7 held the line, firing in controlled bursts as they made their way toward the extraction point. "Head for the ridge," Ethan ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. The ridge loomed in the distance, barely visible through the storm. It was their only chance. If they could get there, they might be able to hold the high ground long enough for their shuttle to pick them up. But the creatures seemed to sense their intent, moving faster now, their shrieks rising in intensity as they closed in on the fleeing squad. "They're gaining on us," Jax shouted, firing off another burst of rounds. One of the beasts went down, but two more took its place, their claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. "Keep moving," Ethan snapped, raising his rifle and dropping another creature that got too close. The wind howled around them, carrying the creature's eerie shrieks. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as they pushed through the snow, the icy ground giving way beneath their boots. Every step felt like it took too long, every second a battle for survival. Then through the storm, Ethan saw it, the ridge, its jagged edge rising above the frozen wasteland like a lifeline. "Almost there," he called, urging his team forward. They reached the base of the ridge just as the creatures closed in. Jax was the first to start climbing, his massive frame moving with surprising agility as he hauled himself up the rocky incline. Reed followed close behind, his breathing labored, but determined. Ethan covered their retreat, his rifle firing in precise bursts as the creatures lunged at them from below. "Core, go!" Ethan ordered, firing over her head as she scrambled up the ridge. The creatures were relentless, their claws digging into the ice as they pursued the squad up the narrow path. Ethan was the last to climb, his heart pounding as he pulled himself up the final ledge. He turned, firing one last shot into the lead creature's chest before scrambling to his feet. "Set up a perimeter," Ethan commanded, his breath coming in sharp gasps as he surveyed the ridge. The creatures gathered below, pacing just out of range, their eyes glowing in the storm. They circled the ridge, waiting, watching. Ethan could feel their hunger, their need to strike. But something else gnawed at him, a sense that this attack was just the beginning. "Why are they waiting?" Reed asked, his voice trembling as he looked down at the creatures. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was clear. They were being herded. The creatures weren't just hunting them. They were driving them towards something, pushing them deeper into the planet's icy heart. "We need that extraction now," Ethan said, his voice grim as he keyed into the ship's comms. "Get us out of here." "Negative, Sergeant," came the pilot's crackling voice. "There's interference from the storm. Can't get a lock on your position." Ethan clenched his jaw. The storm wasn't just natural. It was being controlled. Something on Thorus was manipulating the weather, keeping them trapped. "We're not getting off this ridge," Jax said, his voice heavy with resignation as he stared at the creatures below. "Not unless we find a way to stop whatever's controlling this storm." Ethan nodded, his mind already racing. They had the data, but now the mission was about survival. Thorus wasn't just a death world, it was a trap, and something far more dangerous than these creatures was lurking beneath the ice. Ethan scanned the ridge, his mind racing. The creatures below paced, their glowing eyes fixed on Vanguard 7. They were being hunted, but not in the way he had first thought. This wasn't just a random attack. Something on this planet was orchestrating the storm, controlling the creatures and trapping them here. "We need a way out of this," Jax muttered, his breath steaming in the cold. "We can't stay pinned down like this." Ethan crouched, glancing at Lena Core. "Core, is there anything in that data we downloaded? Anything that could explain what's controlling this weather?" Lena pulled out the data chip and quickly accessed the files on her wrist device. Her fingers flew across the screen as she parsed through the information. The tension grew, the howling wind around them intensifying, as if the planet itself was growing impatient. "There!" Lena shouted. "There's a mention of a control station, deep underground, not far from here. It's where the colony monitored and manipulated the planet's environment. If we can get to it, we might be able to shut this down." "Underground?" Reed asked, his voice barely containing his fear. With those things down there, Ethan stood, eyes narrowing. We have no choice. If we stay here, they'll wear us down. We'll freeze or get torn apart. Our only chance is to stop whatever's controlling this planet. Jax hefted his rifle. Lead the way, Sarge. Let's end this. Ethan nodded and led his team down the other side of the ridge, away from the circling creatures. The path was treacherous, the icy winds biting at their exposed skin. Every step was a battle, but they pushed forward, following the coordinates Lena had found. They moved in silence, the storm raging around them. Ethan's mind was focused, calculating every move, every potential threat. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about stopping whatever dark force had been awakened on Thorus. After what felt like hours, they reached a massive crevice in the ice, a dark tunnel leading deep underground. The entrance was surrounded by strange alien markings, glowing faintly in the storm's dim light. This is it, Lena said, checking her readings. The control station is down there. Ethan motioned for his squad to move in, their weapons raised as they descended into the tunnel. The air grew warmer as they went deeper, the icy winds replaced by a low hum that vibrated through the walls. It was unnatural, a reminder that they were stepping into something far beyond their understanding. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, filled with strange, crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. At the center of the room stood a massive console, ancient and alien in design, yet somehow familiar. It was the heart of the storm, the control center for the planet's weather. This is it, Lena whispered, moving toward the console. As she began to work on the terminal, Ethan's eyes darted around the chamber. The creatures, they had followed them. He could hear their chittering echoes in the dark tunnels beyond, growing louder, more aggressive. Time was running out. Can you shut it down? Ethan asked, his voice tight. I'm trying, Lena said, her fingers flying over the controls. The system's ancient, but I think I can. Before she could finish, the tunnel erupted with the sound of claws scraping against stone. The creatures poured into the chamber, their dark forms silhouetted against the glowing crystals. Their eyes burned with hunger, their movements fast and calculated. Hold them off, Ethan shouted, raising his rifle. Core, shut that thing down! The squad formed a defensive line, their rifles firing in short, controlled bursts. The creatures lunged, claws slashing through the air, but Vanguard 7 held their ground, their weapons cutting down the attackers with deadly precision. Jax moved like a machine, his rifle kicking in his hands as he mowed down the creatures one by one. They just keep coming, Reed shouted, his voice tinged with panic. They're protecting the control station, Ethan realized. They're not just hunting us. They're defending this place. They won't stop unless we stop the storm, Jax grunted, smashing the butt of his rifle into a creature's skull. Almost there, Lena shouted, her voice frantic as she worked at the console. The creatures were closing in, their numbers overwhelming. Ethan fired, each shot deliberate, but the beasts kept coming, their claws slashing through the air. One of them lunged at Reed, but Ethan turned just in time, firing a shot that sent the creature sprawling to the ground. We're running out of time, Core, Ethan barked, his heart pounding. Lena's fingers flew across the console one last time. Got it, she yelled, slamming her hand down on a glowing control. The chamber shook violently, the crystals around them flashing with a brilliant light. Suddenly, the storm outside began to die. The wind's howling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The creatures froze, their glowing eyes flickering out one by one as they collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, lowering his rifle. The storm was over. Thorus was no longer fighting back. It's done, Lena said, stepping back from the console, her face pale with exhaustion. Ethan looked at his team, Jax, Reed, Lena. They had survived against impossible odds. Thorus, the Death World, had thrown everything it had at them, but they had endured. Ethan activated his comms. This is Vanguard 7. The storm's down. We need extraction now. The reply was immediate. Copy that. Vanguard 7. Extraction inbound. As they climbed back out of the tunnel and into the now quiet landscape of Thorus, Ethan couldn't help but look back at the control station one last time. This planet had been a trap, a nightmare designed to test their limits. But they had faced it head-on and won. "Think anyone will believe us when we tell them what we went through?" Reed asked, his voice shaking slightly with the cold and adrenaline. Ethan smirked, shaking his head. "Number. But that's not why we're here." The shuttle appeared in the distance, cutting through the now clear sky as it descended toward them. As it landed, Ethan and his squad boarded, the door closing behind them. They were leaving Thorus behind, but the memory of this mission, of the fire and ice they had endured, would stay with them forever. Ethan sat down in the shuttle's cramped seat, his breath finally steady. "Let's go home,"